is Big Play Detroit. I am Chris Castellani. We got Austin Sisler riding shotgun today, producing as always. Welcome in after a very eventful week here in the summer of Michigan/Detroit-based sports. A lot of news that is currently developing, a lot of news that has developed. We're going to discuss all of it, but we are going to start by talking about our Detroit Tigers, who have entered the All-Star break in a precarious place. 8 games under 500, though I don't want to diminish what they did in this most recent week. A 4-2 homestand. You swept the Athletics, who are just a mess right now. You had a really tough series against the Phillies where you lost 2-3. And look, I've pointed out the fact that you kind of need to start doing some extraordinary things, but who did you lose to? You lost to Christopher Sanchez and Zach Wheeler. You know, these are guys that have gotten Cy Young consideration recently in their careers. They're going to continue to get Cy Young consideration. I mean, Wheeler just looked unstoppable and has looked unstoppable over his last several outings. So, look, as a whole, I don't want to ignore the fact that they continue to play better. But we're now at a point 18 games away from the trade deadline where the board starts to become a little bit clearer on what the future is going to look like for this Tigers team. And that future obviously involves Tarik Skubal and what his fate is ultimately going to be. Let's just discuss it because I feel like I have finally sort of made my decision on what things are going to look like. Because the team as of now, I think, is 3.5 games out of that last playoff spot, which is far from insurmountable, right? With as bad as they've played, it is worth acknowledging this American League is bad. I mean, we talk about the division usually being weak. The American League is historically weak this year. There's a chance an 80-win team could potentially find their way into the postseason this year. I mean, that's how down the American League is, and that is often, that is the expense or what you run into when you expand the playoffs sometimes is there's going to be those weird years. Here's the thing. I think people have been looking at Tarik Skubal's fate as a strictly buy or sell thing. Either you sell off Tarik Skubal at the deadline and you are punting on the season, or you are aggressive, you go out and you buy, you upgrade your roster, you get better, and you make a World Series push. I think that there is now a place, given the way this team performed without Tarik and given the way they've looked over the last month and a half, where you can trade Tarik Skubal and still sell to your fan base that you have a shot for a couple reasons. Reason number one, something just weird is going on with Tarik and the organization right now. And I can't necessarily put my finger on it. Maybe it is as simple as the business side of things, but whether it's some of his quotes or him saying he wants to be here, but only for the rest of the season, and he wants him to buy, or the Tigers never offering him a contract, which, that is true. They have not offered him a deal yet over the last few years, so it's not like he's turned them down necessarily. He probably would, but that's not conclusive. Number two is the fact that, and I know it was an outlier, but I guarantee you Scott Harris is going to bring it up. If they sell at the deadline or trade Tarik, the first thing he's going to talk about is the fact that we did the same thing 2 years ago when we made the playoffs. I think that's an outlier. I think that's a tough sell to your fan base because that was a kind of 1 in a million fluke where they just got crazy hot. But if you want to sell that, you can sell that. And reason number 3 is you have a pitching staff right now that has been dazzling. And you could argue since he's come back, Tarik has been their 3rd or 4th best starter. Now, do I think it's going to stay that way? No. I firmly believe Tarik Skubal is going to, round out and eventually go back to being an elite pitcher. Maybe not this season, but at some point in his career, he's going to get that contract. I think he's got more Cy Young caliber seasons left in him. But when you look at Milton and you look at the way that Jack has been pitching over the last month, and Montero, who I know is now in the bullpen, but as a starter had been great, right? And you have Jackson Jobe coming back. And there's still, is there a chance to get Verlander back? If he does he go to the bullpen? We'll see. Framber Valdez just had arguably his best outing as a Tiger in that most recent start against the Athletics. You have a pitching staff that even without Tarik Skubal is still probably one of the best in the American League, as crazy as that is to say. And you have to do what's in the best interest for the team. And I think you have entered this weird place where you can kind of find this perfect compromise where you can trade off Skubal, you can get pieces back that you feel good about. He is obviously going to be the most prized possession at the deadline. And you can still theoretically look at your roster and say, hey, we're not giving up on anything. Because the truth is, as I just brought up, every day you're going to be throwing out a starter that right now, at least, you're going to feel pretty good about them being on the mound. And that's even if you ship Tarek off to another team. This is not me coming on here and saying that this team is going to the playoffs regardless of Tarek's absence. Okay. And it's not me saying that they're going to get better if they trade Tarek Skubal. But you have to look at the future. You have to look at the situation and the contract that Skubal has right now, which is only going to last for another half of a season. And I think that if it was simply just that you traded Tarek, and I think that the fan base remains engaged in what your team is doing, I don't think it's that difficult of a sell. I think that it's helped that he hasn't pitched a brilliant baseball since coming off of the IL. I think it'll make losing him a little bit easier for the organization. If you just do that and do nothing else, hold on to Mize, hold on to Glaber, hold on to these other pieces, that's not a full fire sale. And I think given where the American League and where this division is at right now, I'm okay with that. I mean, do you trust that the Chicago White Sox are going to stay at the top of this division? Do you trust that the Guardians are going to stay at the top of this division? Maybe them, but there's probably going to be some regression. And if there's not regression in the division, look at where the wild card is at. You could trade Skubal and still have a shot. That's kind of where I stand on it right now. Austin, what are your thoughts? Because I get asked about this stuff a lot, and I don't know what the package is going to look like. Not going to make any guarantees, but I think the deeper we get into this, the more I can see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, you made a lot of really great points there. I think that the next week and a half or so are going to determine a lot, because as of right now, I believe they're 6.5 back from the division, 3.5 back from the wild card. And, I've been looking at some of the recent prizes over the last handful of years at the deadline, like the biggest pieces, what did they go for, and how did these prospects turn out? And it looks like most of these packages and these top prospects that were supposed to be huge returns for some of these best pieces just have not really turned out that well. Now, of course, Scott Harris is a pretty smart guy. He can probably try to find some pieces that he likes. And I mean, we've had some guys like Troy Melton came out of nowhere, right? Like we had no idea that he was going to be what he's been so far. So you never really know. But we're talking about the best pitcher in baseball, or a guy who has been over the last 2 years and still has that capability within him, even though he's not, necessarily been our best pitcher since coming back from injury. But I mean, he still looks pretty good. I have such a hard time with this because I think that if you are competing for something, especially when coming into this year, this was supposed to be our go for it year, right? McGonigal's called up at the beginning of the season. We bring back Verlander, we sign Framber. This is Scott Harris's version of going for it. And if you trade off Tarek Skubal, even if you keep the rest of those pieces intact, I think for some fans, even if they don't think you're punting the season, that is a hard sell. Now, you brought up the fact that, the Tigers did trade off a lot of pieces in 2024, and they wound up making the playoffs somehow. That will absolutely be the first thing that Scott Harris goes to, 110%. But I think you're completely right that was largely an outlier. Now, this team is a lot closer to contention, and this American League is much worse than the one that we saw in 2024. Yeah, it's just, when it comes to Tarek Skubal and this contract situation, I think that he's definitely going to get to free agency regardless. Even if we overwhelmed him with an offer, that's the thing that I see so many people talking about is fans want them to just blow Tarek Skubal away with an offer so that he'll re-sign while he's still a Tiger. And that's just not going to happen. Scott Boras is going to force him to get to free agency, field every offer, see what's out there, and then he'll make a decision. I definitely think the Tigers could retain him, but Chris Ilitch is not his father, or to this point, he has not proven to be his father. So it's looking unlikely that will happen. So I think a lot of us are pretty certain that we're not going to have Tarek Skubal beyond this season. But if this is our go for it year, and obviously a lot has changed, horrible month of June, so many injuries and all of that, I do not think that we will have a team that, even if we get to the postseason, even if we win, a series or so, I don't think it's a team that can make a deep run into the postseason. And, what do you want to have? Do you want to have a team that, might make the postseason every single year, win a series maybe, and then gets eliminated? Or do you want to try and push the chips to the center and, make a deep run? Hopefully, you can upset some teams, maybe make it to the World Series. You never really know. And so that's an issue I've had with Scott Harris so far in his tenure is like he seems to be a bit of a prospect hoarder. And like that's great. He's built a phenomenal farm system. But at what point do you look at this and like want a better major league team? Because that's all we really care about. Like you want to have a good farm system, developmental system, but you know, if the Tigers win, that's all that really matters. Yeah. So I think that the next week and a half after the All-Star break will kind of, determine where Scott Harris's head is, where the Tigers are at in the standings. Fingers crossed that they do hold on to Skubal as much as I see some of the value in potentially sending him away. But I don't know that they will get the pieces back to help them make a deep run this year if they should.
Yeah, and I want to make one more point because I get asked about this every day, multiple times a day. I hate the idea of selling. Like I'm talking about what is best for this current team. And the unfortunate truth, they haven't played well enough to earn themselves the right to be buyers. Like you teams that are 8 games under 500 don't buy at the deadline. And I understand how they've played the last month and a half. We can point to outliers. We can point to run differential. I understand that. And over time, those percentages play out. But the season's a big sample size. 90, 100 games is a big sample size. That's going to be what you'll have played by the time the deadline comes around, and you just haven't been able to do the little things to put yourself in position to be a first-place team or go for it. If they were 8 games above 500, not only am I saying not trade Tarek, I'm saying go out and buy. Go out and make moves to push for the World Series, but you have to acknowledge the reality of the situation, as unfortunate and frustrating as that reality may be. When we return, segment number 2, there's some news that is coming out of Ann Arbor that I want to discuss. It's not officially official yet. I'll discuss that when we return in segment number 2. It involves Athletic Director Warde Manuel. All right, we are back. Segment number 2. This is Big Play Detroit. So this is some news that, again, like I said at the end of segment 1, it's not official yet, but it's very much at the goal line. At the same time, I've seen weirder things happen. So the report that's coming out right now is that Michigan's Board of Regents will be having, I can never say that word, will be having a meeting on Thursday to discuss a potential buyout for Warde Manuel, Michigan's athletic director, possibly soon to be former athletic director. Now, where this comes from largely is because of the fact that after all the Sharon Moore nonsense went down, Michigan opened an investigation into their athletic department for reasons that are very public over the last decade. There's been a million different scandals that they've looked into. You could argue lack of institutional control, and there's been an investigation. Now, what makes me kind of chuckle is the fact that I would argue if you have to open an investigation into your athletic department, at that point, you should probably fire your athletic director. Because odds are, and I know I'm not saying it's impossible, but generally speaking, investigations don't result in good news. Like nobody goes into an investigation and comes away from it saying, God, you know what? I guess Michigan's just been clean the whole time and we were all wrong. Warde Manuel, you can stay here. Like, I think it was pretty obvious where this was headed. But Warde Manuel is a guy that has been around Michigan for a long time, been their athletic director for a decade, been somebody that the university has had relationships with for a long time, played football there. So it was never going to be as simple as just a year fired, and he's going to get his big buyout. Here's the 2 things I want to say. The sad truth is that even with Warde Manuel gone, his legacy of corruption and what he did for the Michigan brand, both positive and negative, because there were championships won when he was the athletic director here. Like, that's undeniable. That's not going away. There's going to be more things that are going to come out. And sadly, I think even though we are, 3 years removed from that season, the more we're going to learn about maybe not necessarily his involvement, but potentially what Warde Manuel knew about things like the sign stealing in the championship season, or about Sharon Moore's inappropriate relationship with his staffer. This was stuff where he was pleading ignorance for a lot of it, saying, I didn't know about this. I felt blindsided by it. I'm not saying it's inevitable, but there's a lot of smoke coming out of Ann Arbor that indicates this is somebody who knew about this stuff and kind of turned the other cheek to it and allowed it to happen because Michigan was winning a lot of games. And it greatly hurt the integrity of the Michigan brand. And it's going to stay that way for quite a while. These things don't go away in a year or two. At the same time, I'm going to say about the potential loss of Warde Manuel what I said about the loss of Sharon Moore, which is there's people who can celebrate this. And I'm not going to act like these stories are good stories for the university, but let's be real. Michigan football got better after they fired Sharon Moore. Kyle Whittingham, regardless how you feel about him, is a massive upgrade over Sharon Moore as a coach. I mean, just in terms of wins and losses, but in terms of ability to run a program, longevity, resume, integrity, it's all, he clears more on his worst day. So they got better. We'll see how Michigan handles this, but quite frankly, I can't imagine post-Warde Manuel, you go out and get an athletic director who is going to be at the forefront of this many messes. Like, there has to be an improvement beyond that. So to me, as sad as it is, the way this all went down and the just almost a historic number of scandals that came out of Ann Arbor when he was here, I'm pleased to hear this. I wish it would have happened sooner. And I think that as we get deeper, the more we'll look at it and say, how didn't this happen sooner? This was a guy that probably could have been let go several years ago. And you buy yourself time when you win. And that is the unfortunate truth of college athletics and really sports in general, is that when you win a lot of games, you'll turn a blind eye to a lot of things. And I think that's the result of what happened with Warde Manuel here. It's one of those things I don't, he probably doesn't need my advice or isn't listening to the show. I recommend he be a guy that just leaves the public eye for a long time. I just think that he overstayed his welcome at U of M. I think that when you look at what went down and his handling of said things, are all of these scandals his fault? No. But look, man, when there's a big problem in America, we look at the president. Okay, whether it's the president's fault or not, that's just what happens. Doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. When something happens that's poor or there's a scandal in an athletic department, you look at the athletic director. And when it's one scandal or two scandals or three scandals, you say, okay, look, the guy can't be everywhere all at once. When it's 20 something all under the same regime, there's fingers that you have to point at Warde Manuel. And I think that Michigan, I'm not going to get on my soapbox here and talk about the Michigan way or the Michigan brand, whatever that is, because I think that that's been, quite frankly, diluted and kind of, mutilated over the last decade or last several years. But you can't tell me that Michigan isn't better or can't be better than the sheer number of scandals that we got while Warde Manuel was the athletic director here. So I am very much looking forward, hopefully, to brighter days and to cooler heads prevailing, because it's just been too messy over the last several years. All right, we'll be back. And Austin, I'll add you in on this for segment number 3. Pistons made some moves, and I want to talk about it because it's been a lot of rearranging of the deck chairs. I'm not going to say rearranging of the deck chairs of the Titanic, because this is a good team, but we'll discuss that when we return. This is a Big Play Detroit. All right, segment number 3. Pistons made some moves last week, a signing and a trade. Big move. They signed John Collins to a 3-year, $51 million contract. The power forward. Look, the guy, he can shoot a little bit. He can stretch the floor. Good post presence. Like, there is, I think, culturally, when you look at what he's going to bring in terms of toughness, the way that he can rebound the basketball, I think there's a lot of fits. The NBA, for a sport that doesn't have a salary cap, is crazy to me, because $51 million for this guy. Okay. Like, that's the market. I know we talk about it in baseball all the time, but that's not the interesting move to me, really. The more interesting move is the Pistons trading away officially Isaiah Stewart, Karis LeVert, Marcus Sasser, and 2 second-round picks. And in return, they get Collins, who they then signed to that 3-year deal, Taurean Prince, and former Michigan State Spartan Gary Harris. So I don't want to just come across like a broken record with all these different things that I'm talking about here. Austin, I'm going to pause this because so that trade is complete, and like I said, I don't want to just be coming across like a broken record consistently because there are things when you look at these deals that stand out. The biggest thing is that the Pistons a year ago, especially in the postseason, were severely lacking in outside shooting. And Duncan, who's still on the roster, but they could be moving. Austin, you and I were talking about that off the air. That's a possibility. But I think as a whole, when you look at how this team is going to approach spacing the floor and how they're going to approach scoring the basketball, I think that their outside shooting has improved immensely with most of the moves they've made in this offseason. So I don't want to look at this and say, oh my God, it's a complete failure. They're screwing it up. At the same time, I think I've been very consistent with this, and I'm going to continue to be. Who is your legitimate number 2 option? And don't give me Jalen Duren because he's a big man, and we saw what happened in the postseason. And is he a guy that can create his own shot? Not necessarily. This roster is fine, and you have a star player in Cade Cunningham. You still don't have that second option that you legitimately trust to be the guy that can get you big buckets in big situations in big games, especially in the postseason. I'm not seeing it, and obviously Mike Valenti kind of started a firestorm, and I don't know if he's telling the truth or not. I don't know if he's correct or not, saying that the Pistons may very well be done with their offseason. I'm not going to say whether or not that's true because we still have more time. If it is, it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell because I just feel like while you maybe got marginally better, you are in a conference full of teams that made some pretty big moves, that landed some big punches. I mean, I understand they haven't made the finals since Allen Iverson, but like the Sixers went out and really threw their hat into the ring. I know there's this weird investigation thing with Kawhi going on, but like the Raptors attempted to get better. Teams, the Cavs aren't going anywhere. We're still waiting for the LeBron news. So I view this as sort of a shoulder shrug, which isn't necessarily it's so much better than a thumbs down, but it's a heck of a lot worse than what we hoped for, which is a team that really threw their hat in the ring and added that second scorer. Austin, is there anything I'm missing?
No, not at all. Before I get into this number 2 score, I would like to say I did enjoy this trade from the past week, mostly from like a selfish Michigan State fan kind of perspective, because I felt like the Motor City was getting a little bit too maize and blue with Hutch and Federer and Larkin and all those guys. But good to see a Spartan in the Motor City. But as for this offseason as a whole, you're completely right. I don't buy that the Pistons are done and that they're not moving to get a number 2 because they've shipped off like a lot of key pieces, whether it's culturally or just in terms of what they were getting from certain guys, and they've cleared a lot of space. Yes, they have dished out some contracts to guys to extend them even after acquiring them, but they still have some space to make a move. And I think that it was clear to all of us and last season and in the postseason, despite how good the Pistons were, Duncan Robinson and Tobias Harris cannot be your number 2 or number 3 scorer. Like, it's just, you're not going to win an NBA championship that way. This offseason, they've done nothing but try to create space, both roster construction wise and in terms of their finances. So I definitely think they're trying to get a number 2 scorer behind Cade. I think the problem is they're not finding the right deal. Now, there's still some guys out there. I think a lot of people really want Trey Murphy. There were rumors swirling around about Kevin Durant. I think that is, there have been rumors connecting them to every single player you can imagine, whether it was Kyrie, Kawhi, LeBron, even, right now looks like Kevin Durant is the hot piece, but we'll see if they stay focused on him or not. I do think all of these rumors are legitimate. It's just they're not pulling the trigger. And I hope that, this offseason doesn't go by without them finally making a big move to complement Cade and give the Pistons a team that can really make it the distance. Outside of having a number 2 scorer, my big thing is I want them to fill out this roster, or the lineup, at least the starting 5, and have complementary pieces that work together. I don't want them to necessarily sacrifice defense for offense, but you absolutely have to get a good number 2 scorer. and it would be good to have a good starting five all the way through. I'm not an NBA expert. I, kind of just latched onto the Pistons since they've been good recently. I hadn't watched them in a super long time, but like Duran right now, it looks like he's trying to wait the Pistons out to get a max contract. I'm sorry, but you do not give a max contract to a lob threat. He made an all-star team. That's great. He was a significant contributor to this team. But I just saw a rumor that it looks like Wembanyama is considering not taking a max contract so that the Spurs can be better. And if Victor Wembanyama isn't getting a max contract, Jalen Duren should not be anywhere close to that. And not to get too into the weeds about the Tigers, but I think that's potentially a situation that they might have to deal with Riley Green at some point once it comes time to re-sign him, because he's a great player, 3-time All-Star now, and he's had a better season this year than he has the past few seasons. So, that'll definitely help his chances. But he's not that, middle of the order guy that I think a lot of us hoped he would be, that MVP caliber guy. He's just not at that level. So if he's wanting that kind of a contract that Jalen Duren wants with the Pistons, he might not be in Detroit forever. But back to the Pistons as a whole, I don't know if they have the money to do this. I don't know what they're capable of doing. But I think it would be great if they kind of tried to touch all the bases here. It'd be great if they traded for Trey Murphy, found a way to wait Jalen Duren out and extend him to a cheaper contract. And I think that's what's going to happen because the Pistons have the ability to match any contract that another team would be to offer him. And I don't think any team is going to offer him a max contract or anything super overwhelming. And then, if you get a number 2 and you bring Jalen Duren back, I think you're still kind of looking for a number 4 guy. And at that point, I think you're able to, since you have a number 2 scorer, to double down on defense with Ausar and maybe sign somebody to like a vet minimum, like a Draymond Green, which would be, kind of give them a pretty complementary roster in terms of scoring and defense. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, I have no idea if they can even do that in terms of what their, cap space is and everything. But hopefully they can bring Jalen Duren back, and hopefully they find that number 2 and they're not, coming around to next season and they weren't able to make any significant additions.
Yeah, I'm still going to give them an incomplete grade until I see what the final product looks like. I think it's silly to come on here and rip them when the offseason is not over. But, TikTok, I mean, other teams have aligned their chess pieces and you've gotten marginally better or stayed the same. We'll see. So next segment, Austin, you're going to run point. It is going to be our I'll Say This segment, talking about a Tigers pitcher that is starting to climb his way back up with a few rehab starts, that being still youngster Jackson Jobe. We'll discuss that when we return. All right, segment number 4. This is Big Play Detroit. Austin, this is your time to shine. It is All Say This. What you got this week? Take it away.
I'll say this. Jackson Jobe will be critical to the Tigers' success in 2026. And it's interesting because you brought up some things about Skubal that I wasn't really thinking about earlier in the show, and whether or not they're going to trade him away, but still potentially either buy or maintain the roster, or whatever they're going to do. I was mostly thinking of it in terms of, what Jackson Jobe could bring to the bullpen, because as you brought up, the rotation is looking pretty stout right now, whether or not you have Skubal in it. Of course, you have Framber. Melton's been great. Mize is pitching at an all-star level. Jack is getting better. And, Montero has contributed quite a bit this season. Jackson Jobe, whether it is in the rotation or in the bullpen, I think is going to have a key role to play, because you've said it all throughout the season. I mean, we all see what has happened with the bullpen. They're just not delivering for us. They've blown quite a few wins for us this season. And the conversation on whether or not Skubal is staying could be completely different if not for, them blowing saves. Kenley has blown quite a few this year. But a key issue with that is the fact that they don't have a lot of swing and miss in the bullpen. And Jackson Jobe, he can crank it up to triple digits. And we all know about, the spin on his breaking balls. Same thing with the rotation. If we do trade off Skubal, I'm not sure how they're going to arrange their pieces. We might get Verlander back. Who knows who might get injured? Or you always kind of want to go with the hot hand, especially when you have so many youngsters. But one way or another, I think that there is going to be a key role for Jackson Jobe to play, even though, this entire season we've played without him so far. And I really hope he can step up because we're either trading away an ace and he might, have to pick up some of the load that Skubal left behind, or he might have to be one of the most significant relievers that we have in the pen and trying to get a lot of that swing and miss that we desperately need.
Yes, I would agree. It's very interesting, though, because you wonder where will this team be when he returns. Like, that's the thing, is if they are close to contention or close to a playoff spot, and you now have both him and potentially Montero as multi-inning pieces out of that bullpen, I mean, that's just a huge advantage. And who knows, maybe one of them's a starter, maybe Verlander's out of the pen, but the fact is you're running into the possibility of getting several pitchers back. We have seen, and I know it was in limited action often, in spring training, but we've seen what Joe has been as a bullpen piece and the way he airs out that fastball. Like, there is long term, of course, he's still a starter, but there is, a closer energy or at least closer stuff that the guy can bring. It's almost, there's a part of me that wants to see them stick in this race just to see what he could be as that multi-inning guy. Because if there's anyone in this organization who is going to be amped to be back on the mound, that it's going to be Jackson Jobe. So it's something to pay attention to. I'm excited to see him back, but it would be even more exciting to see him back in a role that is actually helping them down the stretch. So much of that is going to depend on other factors, like we said earlier in the show. All right, we'll be back. It'll be our Fact or Fiction segment. We didn't address this earlier, but it's time to talk about it. Michigan officially has a head basketball coach for the long term? Question mark. We will discuss that in our Fact or Fiction segment next. All right, segment number 5, just to recap here. I believe it was on either Thursday or Friday. Michigan took the interim tag off of Mike Boynton. He is officially going to be Michigan's head basketball coach, at least for the foreseeable future. It's a 2-year contract. Roster retention, obviously, I think was a big part of this. But it's our time for our Fact or Fiction segment. I want to talk about it. Austin, what's today's Fact or Fiction?
Fact or Fiction? Mike Boynton Jr. is the long-term answer at Michigan.
This is tough. And if you would have asked me a month ago, just knowing what his track record was going back to Oklahoma State, I think it would have been much more definitive in terms of the fiction part of this. He is only, and this is a guy who has a fair amount of head coaching experience at the D1 level, only 44 years old. We thought Dusty was young. This guy's even younger. I mean, this is by coaching standards a youthful guy. And yes, had a stint at Oklahoma State that didn't go particularly well. Had that one team with Cade that was good, ended up getting upset. But this is a different era of college athletics, and it is sure as hell a different university and a different program than what he had at Oklahoma State. It's not to disparage them, but let's be honest, he is inheriting a pretty darn good situation. He, even with Cade Cunningham, never had a roster at Oklahoma State as good as what he's going to have at Michigan this year. And Dusty obviously deserves a lot of credit for that, but Boynton, as a guy who brought in a lot of these guys, as a recruiter, and as somebody who got these guys to continue to buy in, deserves credit for that as well. It is stunning with the amount of talent that's on this roster that they didn't lose more guys. It's crazy. It's crazy that essentially the entire roster that Dusty constructed, LJ Kaysen still is an outlier. We'll see what happens there, but it's crazy that all of these guys are going to be coming back. And yes, there is a disappointment, and that was inevitable because Dusty was just that dude. And I think I said this in my video after the Boynton announcement was made. There's a chance that Michigan lost like the college basketball version of Nick Saban, who's just one of these guys who's so competitive and so just enamored with the idea of winning this thing every single year and just would not stop. There's maybe 2 or 3 people in college basketball that have that kind of mindset, Dan Hurley maybe being the other one. You lost that. So there are positives to this, but we discuss it with baseball all the time. We discuss it with football, and it's true in college athletics as well. Roster construction, extremely important, more important than it's ever been. Resources. Do you have NIL money? Are you able to pay guys through the portal? Matters a ton. But going back to the days of Beeline, and then we saw the years of Juwan and paved the way for Dusty, there is nothing more important than having a coaching staff that knows how to develop and get the most out of these players. And that is where, unfortunately, even though I'm kind of, my thumb's kind of in the middle, if you ask me if this is going to work long term, my answer would still be no. And I'd say fiction on this. I still think they can have a really good team next year because you're inheriting not just a lot of players from the Dusty era, but you're inheriting a lot of that culture. I mean, people forget what Juwan was in year 2. I mean, this is a guy who was, I know it was the COVID year, but that team won the Big Ten. They were a 1 seed. They made it to the Elite 8. Probably should have made the Final Four. Would have if Isaiah Livers doesn't get injured. Like, he was viewed as the toast of the town for a while. It's just one of those things where I'm not going to come on here and completely rip the hire. I think that there is a basis for why they did it. I think in a lot of ways in the short term, especially, it makes sense. But just based on track record, I need to see it to believe it. That was what made Dusty so appealing as opposed to someone like Juwan. Dusty had done it. In this era of college basketball, he'd taken a Florida Atlantic program that, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know Florida Atlantic had a basketball program until we heard about Dusty May, and he takes them to the Final Four, right? It matters, and it just, for the fans, it alleviates a lot of stress when you know you bring in a guy who has had success at the collegiate level. Beeline did a wonderful job at West Virginia, went, above and beyond when he got to Michigan, understandably, and adapted. But he was an established coach at the college level. Boynton was a guy that kind of flamed out. And I've seen tweets, I've seen people say that it wasn't entirely his fault, and maybe it wasn't. But if you just ask me if this is going to work or not long term, and is this a guy that in the next 5 years is going to be able to be on the level with Izzo and Painter and Brad Underwood? And I mean, I think you got to throw McCollum in that conversation at this point. My answer would be no. I felt extremely confident that Dusty was going to be that guy and stay that guy. It doesn't mean Boynton's an awful coach. It doesn't mean that we're going to see an 8-win season like what we saw with Juwan, but we saw last year what this program can be. And that's a program that has Final Four expectations every year. I don't believe that those are going to be the consistent expectations under Boynton. I think that we're going to see a slow decline after what I'm sure will probably be a pretty good first year. Could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. We'll have to wait and see. I do wish him the best, obviously. Like, I want the hire to work. I never understood people who see a guy get hired and they want bad things or they root against him. Like, I hope it's an overwhelming success. By all accounts, it seems like he's presented himself well here. The players love him. I really hope that this does work, and I hope that I'm wrong. But track record, history, as well as, the big shoes that he has to fill kind of speaks for itself. We got one more segment here. It is our gambling segment, and we will talk about it. A little baseball stuff when we returned last week, talked about NL Cy Young. And then Yoshinobu Yamamoto ended up giving up 6 runs in his last start against the Diamondbacks. So I don't know if that one's going to hold a ton of weight, but I want to talk about the American League Cy Young when we return, because I have a pretty strong stance on this, and I think the odds are very much in people's favor when we return. This is Big Play Detroit. The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every goal changes everything. And now, FanDuel is giving you a reason to root for every single one. Introducing Every Goal Pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. That's right. More goals means more bonus bets, and all you have to do is turn on your token. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/BigPlay to get started now. 21 plus, select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus, DC, Kentucky, Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat. For Connecticut, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. For Maryland, visit gamblinghelp.com. linema.org. Call 800-327-5050 for Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8 HOPE New York. Text HOPE NY New York. Call 1-877-770-7867 for Louisiana. All right, Big Play Detroit, final segment here. Last week I talked about the odds for the National League Cy Young, and I took a look on FanDuel at the American League Cy Young odds, and I found it interesting because the current favorite is Cam Schlittler, who is a favorite, but still a plus money favorite at about 250. I'll just be real with you guys. This is not a good Cy Young race. Usually, like I think last year was a prime example of this. Skubal had an amazing year, won it. Skubal had an amazing year, won the Cy Young, deserved to win the Cy Young, but you had great years from Crochet, and you had a great year from Hunter Brown. You had several guys who really threw their hat in the ring and pitched Cy Young caliber baseball. This year, I only see two guys with that potential. One is Cam Schlittler, who's in his second year with the Yankees, who's been absolutely marvelous, and his stuff is ridiculous, even though the Tigers tagged him. He's been great. And second is Dylan Cease. And when I look at the odds at Dylan Cease, who's currently the second favorite, but at plus 350 to win the Cy Young in a race that, is kind of down to two guys at this point, that's the guy I'm pointing to, not just because I think he's a really good pitcher, which he is, but I think that when you look at the peripherals and when you look at the experience that he has as a pitcher, I think it favors him. For one, Cease's peripherals are excellent. FIP, which is something I talk about a lot, but FIP is... There's a lot of different ways to define it. It's essentially an expected ERA, or it's ERA if you got a league average results on balls put in play. There's multiple factors. It basically takes into account the things the pitcher can control, right? Strikeouts, home runs, walks, hit batsmen. If it doesn't take into account, weekly hit singles, stuff like that. And Cease has been great this year. ERA currently of 2.56. His FIP is currently 2.18, which is an indicator that he's actually had a little bit of bad luck as a pitcher. You look at his last 6 outings, he's got an ERA of 1.73, FIP of 150 in that time. That's 36 in the third innings and a ridiculous 56 strikeouts in that time. Has had a few issues with walks in the past, but the biggest reason I wanted to highlight this is that with Schlittler, you have a guy who is going to shatter and surpass his career high in innings pitched. And anytime that happens, especially with a guy who is so reliant on his power stuff, I mean, the guy almost throws exclusively various types of fastballs. I have this belief that there's going to be some wear and tear over time with Cease, who is still a power pitcher, but he's 30 years old. He's had multiple seasons where he's made 28 to 30 starts. He knows the grind of a major league campaign. You couple that with the fact that he's actually had a little bit of bad luck and the fact that this is a Blue Jays staff that has had tremendous success with veteran starters in the past. I mean, you look at what they got from Gausman after they signed him, and he's still there. You look at the year they got from Robbie Ray 5 years ago, winning the Cy Young with Pete Walker as the pitching coach. I think that there are indicators that he's going to stick and end up finding his way as the American League Cy Young winner for the first time in his career. Finished second to Verlander back in 2022. If we're going into the second half and you want to take a flyer out on somebody, Dylan Cease, American League Cy Young, plus 50, that may be your play. All right. That will be your play, and that will do it for Big Play. Big Play Detroit, thank you very much to everyone who tuned in. Social media plugs now. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014, TikTok at Chris Castellani, at Chris Castle95 on Instagram. And, of course, if you want to get caught up on all the post-game videos, you can go to CastellaniContent.com, where we are uploading those in order, archived over the last few seasons. So if you haven't been watching the Tigers and you want to know what's been going on in the first half, you are welcome to go to CastellaniContent.com and check out all of those videos that we post directly to Twitter, as well as all the various social media platforms. We've been popping off on Facebook lately on my private page, which is nice to see. Appreciate all the support. Austin, let's get your plugs in and let's get out of here.
You can follow me on X at Austin Sisler. I'm on Instagram at Austin Sisler_20. And if you're interested in promoting something on our show or sponsoring our show, feel free to reach out to either Chris or myself.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody, for your continued support from Big Play, as well as people on social media as well. Continue to share the stuff that we're creating. We are doing our best to work hard and make good by you. So we'll talk to you again next week. Thank you very much for your support. Like I said, have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.